The mug in my hand suddenly felt heavier than bone, and porcelain should allow. Gavin's voice had cut clean through the clatter of silverware and low conversation like a blade through silk. "Stop asking for money, Mom. Seriously, it's getting old." The words hung in the air. His wife let out a dry, practiced laugh like it was a line rehearsed between them. The room fell silent. My hand hovered mid-pour coffee, inches from the rim of my daughter-in-law's cup. I held it there steady as ever, despite the knot forming in my throat. I didn't say a word. I just placed the mug down, nodded to no one in particular, and returned to my seat. I could feel the heat in my cheeks, not from shame, but from the restraint it took to stay silent. My fork sat untouched beside a plate of half-eaten turkey and green beans. I glanced around the table. No one met my eyes. Not even my brother. Not my niece, not even Nora. My granddaughter who'd been so excited to show me her handmade Christmas card just hours earlier. My own son had thrown me under the bus loud enough for the whole family to hear, but no one said a thing. Not a word. My ex-husband cleared his throat and started some meaningless comment about snow tires. A conversation bloomed down the table, carefully avoiding me. I picked up my napkin, dabbed at my lips, and folded it neatly in half. I kept my hands busy while my mind whirred in a quiet storm. The $880 monthly payments I'd been making for Gavin, the car note, his credit card minimums, that personal loan he never could quite catch up on, they paraded across my memory in tidy rows. 5 years. $45,000. He had the audacity to speak to me like that. In front of everyone, I passed on dessert. Not because I wasn't hungry, but because I couldn't swallow anything past the lump in my throat. I sat, I smiled, and I said nothing. But later that night, I opened my laptop. I set the kettle on the stove, but never turned the burner on. My coat still hung on the back of the chair purse. Unopened keys beside it. I walked straight to the desk tucked in the corner of my living room and opened the laptop. The banking app loaded slowly like it sensed I wasn't ready. When it finally did, the numbers stared back at me with all the honesty people rarely offer. 5 active payments. The first was for Gavin's car, leased in my name, of course. Then 2 separate loan repayments. One was for the dental work Nora needed. The other, I think, for something he once called a bridge until the bonus hits. There was the credit card minimum, always minimum, and a monthly insurance premium I never bothered to ask about. They totaled $880 each month, give or take. I'd gotten so used to seeing the debits that I barely looked anymore. It had all started the year Gavin got laid off. He had called with panic in his voice, said it would just be for a few months. Until spring, he'd said. That was 5 springs ago. I hovered over the edit payment button. The mouse trembled under my hand, not from doubt, but from the weight of habit. I'd kept him afloat for so long, I'd forgotten what stillness felt like. Before I made a move, I opened a folder on my desktop titled Family. Inside a spreadsheet, G. Ashford, Assistance. I scrolled past column after column, dates, vendors, amounts, brief notes scribbled beside each line. Car payment late again, Nora's meds back rent. All documented neat as a ledger. At the bottom in bold it read $45.80.63. I stared at the number. I had never said it out loud, never asked for it back, never even reminded him of it. I closed the laptop and sat still, letting the quiet settle over me. My phone buzzed while I was folding laundry towels, mostly the kind you keep washing even when no one visits. Gavin's name flashed across the screen with a message that barely took a full line. "Hey, Mom, could you spot us $200 for Nora's dance fees? I'll pay you back Friday." Friday never meant this Friday. It never meant any Friday. It meant maybe if he remembered, if there wasn't a car repair or a sale on electronics or a sudden emergency he couldn't explain. I typed back, "I'll think about it." Polite, vague, no promises. 1 second later, a heart emoji popped up from his wife. I hadn't heard from her directly in months, not since the thank you message for the birthday surprise, which I later realized I had unknowingly paid for. A spa day, if the Instagram story was to be believed. I held the phone in both hands, staring down at it like it might say more if I waited long enough. But there was nothing else. No follow-up, no how are you, no mention of Christmas dinner, or if I got home safely. They only text together when they want something, like a team with a shared goal extraction. There was a time I felt honored to be needed. When Gavin was younger, even after the divorce, I loved being his safety net. I gave without hesitation. Helping made me feel like a good mother, maybe even a necessary one. Now each request felt like a withdrawal from a well I didn't remember filling. They didn't ask how I was doing. They didn't check if I could manage it this month. It wasn't really a question. It was a script. I walked over to the printer, opened my laptop, and clicked on the spreadsheet. I selected Print All. It hummed to life, spitting out sheets of numbers and notes. When it finished, I gathered the pages, stacked them neatly, and slid them into a folder marked simply Gavin. The next morning, I opened my banking app. The snow outside had started just after sunrise, dusting the windowsill in a quiet white haze. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee going cold beside me, checkbook untouched. My laptop glowed in the early light, cursor blinking in rhythm like a pulse steady waiting. I hovered over the first one, the car payment. Gavin's SUV registered under my name. He'd promised to refinance it years ago. He never did. I clicked cancel. A confirmation screen popped up. I didn't hesitate. Then the insurance. Cancel. Then the credit card autopay. Cancel. Then the personal loan. The one he called temporary, the one I co-signed for because he was between jobs. Cancel. Then the last one, the second loan I'd forgotten I even set up. It had become background noise. Cancel. 5 payments gone. The bank sent me neat little emails confirming each one, like closing tabs on a browser you've had open too long. I felt it before I understood it, this quiet shift. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't bitterness. It was something closer to stillness. The balance in my account would stay where it belonged this month and next month. I wouldn't be reaching into my future to fund his present anymore. I opened the folder beside me, slid the printed spreadsheet inside, and closed it with both hands, like sealing a box that had been left open too long. I labeled it with the date and put it in the drawer next to my tax returns. I didn't cry. I didn't second guess it. I closed the laptop, drained what was left of the bitter coffee, and turned off my phone. No more notifications. No more autopay confirmations. No more questions I already knew the answers to. I stood up, stretched the tightness out of my shoulders, and started the laundry. An hour later, the first voicemail came in. The voicemail box was full by evening. I saw the alert blinking when I powered my phone back on a quiet red dot, pulsing like a warning light on the dashboard of a car running out of gas. The first message was from Gavin. His voice was tight, strained. Mom, did something happen? I think the insurance didn't go through. I mean, just let me know if there's an issue. The next was from his wife. Sharper. Your bank rejected the payment? You could have told us we have things planned this week. Then louder on the third try. Do you even care if we lose the car? I listened to each message one after another in the same silence I had carried through Christmas. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel powerful. Just still. They weren't calling to ask if I was okay. Not once. Not even a mention of New Year's. Just panic over money. Their money. Or rather, the money I had stopped giving. I placed the phone face down and returned to my meal, a bowl of lentil soup and a piece of bread I'd baked the day before. No noise, no pressure, no performance. Just warmth, quiet, and the flicker of a candle burning low. When I finished eating, I washed the bowl, wiped down the counter, and pulled the novel I'd been meaning to start from the shelf. I read for an hour, then two. Outside, the sky shifted from pale gray to deep winter blue, then to something darker, marked only by the occasional burst of fireworks in the distance. I didn't check my phone again. I didn't reply. I didn't explain. At midnight, I poured myself a glass of sparkling water and stood by the window watching the street below. No resolutions. No noise. Just me. And the quiet beginning of a year that finally felt like mine. The next morning, I opened the curtains to snow and the sound of knocking at my door. He knocked like it was urgent. 3 sharp raps, too fast, too loud. When I opened the door, Gavin stood with his hands in his coat pockets, jaw tight. His wife hovered behind him, arms crossed, lips pressed into a hard line. "Why did you cut everything off without talking to us?" he asked, not angry yet, but close. I stepped aside, letting them in. No hug, no greeting. I didn't offer tea. I didn't offer anything. They stood awkwardly in the middle of my living room, while I walked to the desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out the folder. I handed it to him. "What's this?" "Everything I've paid over the last 5 years," I said. "It's all there. Dates, amounts, notes." His wife leaned over his shoulder, scanned the first page, and scoffed. "You kept records. I'm an accountant," I said calmly. "I keep records of everything." Gavin flipped through the pages, slower now. His brow furrowed, mouth opening as if to argue, then closing again. "You never said it was a big deal," he muttered, not quite meeting my eyes. "It became one, I said, when you acted like I owed it to you." His wife shifted arms, tightening. "We thought we could count on you." "You did," I said. "For 5 years. I just stopped pretending I could afford to be invisible." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was empty. Like air finally cleared after years of smoke. Gavin handed the folder back without a word. I didn't take it. He left it on the table, turned, and walked to the door. His wife followed, but not before pausing to glare at me like I'd broken something sacred. They left without saying goodbye. I didn't feel triumphant, but I didn't feel guilty either. Just clear. That night, I folded the spreadsheet again and placed it back in the drawer next to my will. The phone started ringing again. Not Gavin this time, and not his wife. It was their orbit people I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembering my number. His mother-in-law left a voicemail about how hard things had been lately. Something about Gavin's stress, Nora's recital, and how surely Corinne can understand. It's family. Her sister called next. "They're struggling," she said. "It's not like you to turn your back." Even an old neighbor I barely remembered texted, "Just heard what's going on. Hope you're not letting money ruin family." I didn't reply to any of them. It surprised me at first how quickly people lined up to guilt me. People who had no idea how many quiet transfers I had made, how many months I'd skipped new shoes vacations, even heating a full apartment so Gavin's gas bill got paid. They didn't know the real numbers, but they all had opinions. I didn't explain. Instead, I opened my laptop, navigated to the office supply site I'd bookmarked a year ago, and clicked Add to Cart on a chair I'd never let myself consider. Seriously. Ergonomic. Adjustable. Real lumbar support. I placed the order, then made a cup of tea. The chair arrived 4 days later. I assembled it myself, piece by piece, and set it up by the window where I usually worked. When I sat down, it didn't change the room, but it changed me. My back no longer ached after an hour. My posture straightened naturally. I breathed deeper. I didn't tell anyone about it. Didn't post a picture. Didn't send a receipt to prove I'd finally chosen myself, but I felt it. That quiet shift. That moment of choosing comfort without apology. The old me would have felt indulgent. This version of me just felt level. The next time the phone rang, I let it ring. Then I opened my spreadsheet again and added one more line. Chair, 401278, paid in full. For me. It was a Thursday night when I saw it. A notification popped up on my phone. Gavin's wife had posted a story. The image showed Nora wrapped in a blanket on their couch, cheeks pink from the cold. The caption read, "No heat at the moment, but snuggles keep us warm." Within minutes, the comments poured in. "You poor things. How can family let you go through this?" Some people forget their responsibilities. I watched the dots flash as she replied to each one with carefully worded gratitude, never saying my name, but saying enough. I scrolled once, twice, and closed the app. My stomach didn't twist like it used to. I didn't cry or pace or compose messages I'd never send. I walked to my desk instead and opened the spreadsheet again. The same one Gavin had held in his hands weeks before, flipping through pages like they were meaningless receipts. I stared at the total 458063. Still there, still real. Then I added a new column. Emotionally owed. I didn't fill in a number. I knew there wasn't one. No formula for sleepless nights, for the anxiety of checking balances before groceries, for the way my name had become a silent line item in their lives. I closed the file and leaned back in my new chair. The apartment was warm, paid for, and mine. I thought about calling Gavin not to fight, but to tell him he didn't need to make me the villain to justify his own choices. But I didn't. I had finally stopped chasing peace in other people's chaos. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. "Mom, it's me. Can we talk?" I looked at it for a long time before locking the screen. The snow outside had started to melt, leaving small rivers along the curb. The silence stretched longer than I expected. Weeks went by without a call, a message, or another carefully worded accusation online. It felt unnatural at first, like standing in a room where the clock had stopped ticking. But after a while, the quiet began to sound like peace. I started walking to the bank every Friday morning. It became a small ritual coat scarf, the crunch of salt under my shoes. I'd been holding onto a check for months, a small thank you from a former coworker I once helped through a tax mess. It wasn't much, but it felt like closing an old circle when I finally endorsed it and slid it under the glass. The teller smiled. "Good to see you again, Mrs. Ashford." I nodded, realizing it was the first time someone had said my name that week. When I got home, I opened my laptop and set up a recurring transfer, $880 every month, the same amount that used to vanish into Gavin's debts. This time it would go into an index fund under my name alone. It wasn't a grand plan, just a start. A slow reclaiming of what I'd lost piece by piece. I began noticing other small changes too. My mornings weren't filled with worry anymore. I cooked what I wanted. I slept better. I even called an old friend for lunch, the first time in years I'd accepted an invitation without checking Gavin's calendar in my mind. Then one evening, while I was organizing paperwork, my phone lit up on the desk. "Gavin." The message was short. "I'm sorry. I messed up. I want to fix this. Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time. I read it twice then, a third time. There were no excuses, no blame, just a few bare words. For the first time, they sounded like his. I didn't respond. Spring arrived without ceremony. One morning, I opened the window and the air smelled different, softer, clearer, like something had unclenched. The snow was gone, the sidewalk damp with thaw, and the trees were beginning to hint at green. Inside, my apartment looked the same. Same couch, same framed prints, same narrow galley kitchen with the chipped tile I kept meaning to fix. But it felt lighter, like something invisible had been packed up and hauled out. I didn't check the spreadsheet anymore. I knew the number by heart. $45,080.63. It stayed in the drawer, now filed between a stack of warranties and my will. Not out of anger, not to hold it over him. Just so I could remember that I hadn't imagined it, that every dollar, every transfer, every excuse had happened. Gavin never paid me back. Not after the message. Not after the letter that arrived 2 days later, vague and polite, but still without any plan, any promise. I didn't follow up. I didn't ask again. I had stopped paying for his life. That was the only line that mattered now. Sometimes I still thought about the earlier years, the first request, the way he'd said just until spring, and how I'd believed him, how I'd believed in him. It wasn't love I questioned. It was the direction of it. Mine had always flowed one way, quietly, consistently, without thanks. But not anymore. Now when I brewed coffee, I used the good beans. When I grocery shopped, I bought things that didn't have to be frozen for bulk discounts. I lit a candle without saving it for guests. And on Sunday mornings, I sat in my new chair by the window and read the paper cover to cover. I was no one's safety net anymore. I was my own floor. The phone buzzed once across the table. I glanced at the screen. Gavin's name. A text. No urgency this time. No ask. Just one word, Mom. I turned the page of the paper and kept reading.